whispers of shadow present. The last tape from Chamber 7, written and narrated by Gregory Sparrow. This story is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes only. The tape began with 12 seconds of darkness. Then a man screamed, not the scream of someone surprised, not the scream of someone in pain. It was the sound of a man who had just seen the final moment of his life and understood that it had already happened. A blurred face struck the camera lens. Blood ran across the glass. Behind him stood a steel door marked with a large white number. 7. The man turned towards it. Something knocked from the other side. 3 slow impacts, then 4, then 3 again. The man looked directly into the camera. His eyes were wide, but strangely calm. "Do not open the chamber," he whispered. A voice answered from somewhere behind the camera. It was my voice. "You already did." The screen filled with static. A date appeared in the upper right corner. 17th of September, 2026. I watched that recording on the 12th of September, 5 days before it was supposed to happen. And the man on the screen had been dead for 31 years. My name is Dr. Elias Mercer. Until September 2026, I worked for the Ministry of Defense as an archival media specialist. That title sounds more impressive than the work usually was. Most days, I restored damaged recordings, cataloged obsolete surveillance formats, and determined whether deteriorating tapes contained anything worth preserving. Cold War interviews, training films, decommissioning records, security footage from facilities that no longer existed. The material was classified, but rarely interesting. The government had accumulated millions of hours of video over decades. Most of it showed locked corridors, empty laboratories, and men in uniforms signing forms. I had spent 14 years watching nothing happen. Then we found the cassette from Chamber 7. It was discovered during the clearance of Black Ridge Storage Facility, a former government archive beneath an abandoned communications station in North Yorkshire. Black Ridge was due to be sealed permanently. The upper complex had been empty since 2002, but the underground levels still contained shelves of analog records that had never been digitized. Water damage had spread through the eastern section. Mold covered the walls. Some of the filing rooms were ankle-deep in black water. My team had 6 weeks to inspect anything marked as sensitive before the contractors filled the lower tunnels with concrete. The cassette was found behind a false wall, not inside a cabinet, not on a shelf, behind a wall. One of the workers noticed that the concrete in archive room B19 sounded hollow. When they broke through it, they uncovered a steel locker set into the rock. The locker had no keyhole, no hinges. It had been welded shut. On its surface were 3 faded markings. Section 7. Omega clearance. Do not open without written authority. No record of the locker existed in the building plans. No one on the clearance team had Omega authorization. According to the ministry database, that classification had never existed. The site supervisor called London. London told him to leave the locker untouched. 2 hours later, a separate order arrived, instructing him to remove it immediately and send the contents to our laboratory. Both orders carried valid authentication codes. Both appeared to have been issued by departments that denied sending them. The locker reached us at 1840 on the 12th of September. There was only one object inside, a VHS cassette. It lay inside a black evidence bag that had become brittle with age. A Ministry of Defense seal was stamped across the opening. The seal was dated 1995. On the cassette, someone had glued a typed label. The last tape from Chamber 7. Below that, in red handwriting, do not view. The first thing I noticed was that the cassette was too clean. The locker was damp. Its interior smelled of iron, mildew, and stagnant water. Every surface showed corrosion, but the cassette had no mold, no moisture damage, no dust. It looked as though someone had placed it inside the bag that morning. My assistant, Mara Voss, stood beside me as I examined it. She was 29, sharp-eyed, impatient, and far too intelligent for the position she had been given. Could be a reproduction, she said. The seal is genuine. Then perhaps someone replaced the tape. Inside a welded locker? She looked through the laboratory window at the steel container. There are stranger ways to waste public money. I should have laughed. Instead, I found myself staring at the red words. Do not view. The ink had soaked into the paper unevenly. The handwriting appeared rushed. The final letter trailed downwards, as though the writer had lost control of the pen. There was also something written beneath the main label, almost invisible. I tilted the cassette under the inspection lamp. A date had been scratched directly into the plastic. December 9th, 95. Exactly 31 years earlier, to the day. At 2015, we inserted the cassette into an isolated playback unit. The machine was not connected to the ministry network. It fed directly into a capture station with no external access. Mara controlled the recording equipment. I sat beside her with a notebook. Our security officer, Daniel Reeve, watched from the back of the room. The tape began with 12 seconds of darkness. Then the man screamed. I have already described what we saw. The blood, the door, the number 7, the dead man telling us not to open the chamber. My own voice answering him. When the screen went dark, none of us moved. Mara finally paused the recording. That was you, she said. I know. Reeves stepped closer to the monitor. Has anyone outside this room heard Mercer speak? Thousands of people, I said. I give lectures. I appear in internal training material. So, the voice could have been reconstructed. In 1995? He did not answer. Mara rewound the final section. We listened again. The voice was quiet, slightly distorted by tape noise, but unmistakable. My rhythm, my accent, even the way I drew breath between words. You already did. Reeve asked us to play the remainder. The footage continued after the static. The image stabilized. A fixed camera looked down a corridor. The time code read 23 hours, 47 minutes, and 19 seconds. The date beneath it, the 12th of September, 1995. The walls were concrete, stained with moisture. Pipes ran along the ceiling. A single red lamp flashed above a heavy steel door. Chamber 7. The corridor matched no known section of Black Ridge. A man entered from the left. He wore a white laboratory coat over a military uniform. His identification badge was turned away from the camera. He stood in front of the chamber door and checked his watch. Then he looked directly at the lens. "Observation log 7-4, he said. Dr. Nathaniel Vale recording, September 12th, 1995. Mara searched the database. The result appeared within seconds. Dr. Nathaniel Vale, physicist, civilian consultant to the Ministry of Defense. Reported missing on the 13th of September, 1995. Presumed dead. Vale continued speaking. Subject remains responsive to auditory stimulus. No visible movement inside the chamber for 19 hours. Thermal readings are inconsistent. Internal temperature is recorded at -6 degrees Celsius, but condensation is forming on the exterior surface. He touched the door, pulled his hand away, then stared at his fingers. The door is warm. A second person entered the corridor, a woman carrying a clipboard. Dr. Vale, Control wants another sound test. No. They believe the pattern may be communicative. It is not communicating. They heard words. Vale turned towards her. It repeats words. That is not the same thing. The woman lowered her voice. It said my name. Vale looked at the camera again. End observation. The footage jumped. The same corridor, same angle. The clock now read 0:14. 3 soldiers stood outside Chamber 7. The woman with the clipboard was gone. Vale was arguing with a senior officer whose name badge read Hargreaves. We terminate tonight, Vale said. You do not have authority. I designed the chamber, and the ministry owns what is inside it. You do not understand what is inside it. Then explain it. Vale looked towards the steel door. For several seconds, he said nothing. Finally, he spoke. There is nothing inside the chamber. Hargreaves frowned. We have all seen the subject. No, We have seen what the chamber shows us. What is the difference? Vale moved closer to the officer. The thing behind that door is not a prisoner. It is not an organism. It may not even be present in the way we understand presence. That is not an explanation. It observes expectation. Then it produces confirmation. The officer's expression hardened. You are suggesting it reads minds? No. Vale stared into the camera again. I am suggesting it reads outcomes. A knock sounded from behind the chamber door. 3 impacts, then 4, then 3. One of the soldiers raised his weapon. Hargreaves smiled. There, a deliberate sequence. Vale stepped backwards. That sequence has not happened before. Another knock. 3, 4, 3. Hargreaves approached the door. Vale seized his arm. Do not respond. The officer pulled free. He struck the metal 3 times, paused 4 times, paused again. Before he could complete the sequence, something knocked 3 times from inside. Hargreaves froze. The red light above the door turned green. The locking mechanism released. The image collapsed into static. Mara stopped the tape. For a moment, the only sound in our laboratory was the hum of the playback unit. Reeve moved towards the cassette. Remove it. We haven't finished, I said. You have seen enough. No, we have seen a recording that could have been staged. With a man missing since 1995, and your voice dated 5 days from now? That is why we need to continue. Reeve looked at Mara. She did not move. Play it, I said. She pressed the button. The picture returned. The chamber door was open. The corridor was empty. Beyond the threshold, there was no visible room. Only darkness. Not ordinary darkness. The camera's exposure adjusted repeatedly, searching for detail, but the black space swallowed the light. A figure stood within it. At first, I thought it was Vale. Then it stepped forward. It wore Vale's coat, Vale's uniform, Vale's face. But its proportions were slightly wrong. The arms hung too low. The neck was too still. The smile appeared before the rest of the expression. It looked towards the camera. Then Vale's voice came from behind the lens. That is not me. The figure smiled wider. The tape cut again. At 21:03, the telephone in our laboratory rang. The internal display showed no number. Reeve answered. He listened for several seconds. Then he looked at me. It's for you. Who is it? They wouldn't say. I took the receiver. At first, I heard static, then a low mechanical hum. A voice whispered through it. Dr. Mercer? Yes. You must stop the tape before 23:47. Who is this? There is no chamber 7. The line went dead. I lowered the receiver. The digital clock above the laboratory door read 21:04. Mara had heard only my side of the call. What did they say? I told her. Reeve ordered the tape secured. He removed it from the machine, placed it in a transport case, and locked the case to his wrist. Then he called his superiors. No one answered. Every number connected to the ministry's security directorate redirected to an automated message stating that the offices were closed. It was a Friday evening, but those departments did not close. At 21:18, the lights flickered. At 21:21, the laboratory network disconnected. At 21:26, the building's main lifts stopped responding. We were 7 floors underground. The emergency system showed no fault. Reeve left to check the security desk. He took the tape with him. Mara watched him disappear through the reinforced door. You realize he's not coming back, she said. That is a dramatic assumption. You heard the recording. It was 31 years old. It had tomorrow's date on it. 5 days from now. That doesn't make it less impossible. I sat at the capture station. The footage we had already digitized should have been visible on the local drive. The folder was empty. I checked the logging system. No capture session existed. The machine showed that the playback unit had not been used for 11 days. Mara leaned over my shoulder. That's not possible. Before I could answer, the intercom activated. A burst of static filled the room. Then Reeve's voice came through the speaker. Mercer, open the door. I stood. Mara caught my arm. Wait. Reeve spoke again. I found something. Open the door. The laboratory entrance had a small security window. I looked through it. The corridor outside was empty. Daniel? His voice came from the intercom. I'm standing right here. There was no one beyond the glass. Mara backed away. Ask him where the tape is. Where is the cassette? I said. A pause. Then, inside, chamber 7. The corridor lights went out. The intercom hissed. A final whisper came through. You already opened it. The red emergency lamps activated. Under their dim light, something appeared beyond the laboratory window. A man stood at the far end of the corridor. Reeve. His head was lowered. The transport case still hung from his wrist. He began walking towards us, slowly, unevenly. His right foot dragged behind him. Mara stared through the glass. That isn't how he walks. Reeve stopped outside the door. He raised his face. Blood ran from his nose. His eyes seemed unable to focus. Don't let me in, he said. Then the intercom spoke in his voice. Open the door. The real Reeve turned towards the speaker. Horror spread across his face. "Mercer," he whispered, "whatever you hear, do not." Something pulled him backwards. He vanished so quickly that the transport case struck the glass before disappearing into the darkness. Mara screamed. The corridor remained empty. No footsteps. No struggle. Only the sound of the case chain scraping once across the floor. Then silence. At 22:02, we received a signal from Camera 7. Our building had no Camera 7. The security system listed cameras 1 through 6, then 8 through 42. I had never noticed the missing number. A new window opened on the laboratory monitor. The image showed a concrete corridor, pipes along the ceiling, a red lamp above a steel door. Chamber 7. The timestamp read 22:02. Live. Mara covered her mouth. That's here. No. The pipe layout. Look. She pointed to a junction in the ceiling. The same configuration existed outside our laboratory. The difference was the door. On the live feed, Chamber 7 stood where our archive storage room should have been. A figure appeared on the camera. Daniel Reeve. He stumbled towards the chamber. The case was gone. He pressed both hands against the door, resisting something we could not see. Then the red lamp turned green. The door opened. Reeve looked directly at the camera, not the camera filming him, our screen. He looked at us. His mouth formed 2 words. Don't watch. Something dragged him inside. The door closed. The feed ended. Mara began crying, not loudly. She sat beside the control desk, breathing through clenched teeth. We need to leave. The lifts are down. Stairs. The emergency doors will be sealed. Then we break them. I searched the building map. The escape stairwell ran through the Eastern Service corridor. To reach it, we had to leave the laboratory and pass Archive Storage 7. The room where the chamber appeared on the surveillance feed. The clock read 22:11. We waited 3 minutes before opening the door. The corridor was empty. The lights had not returned. I took a torch from the emergency cabinet. Mara carried a heavy metal tripod as a weapon. We moved quickly. Our footsteps echoed between the concrete walls. At the first junction, we found Reeve's security badge. It lay in the center of the floor. The chain attached to it had been snapped. There was blood on the photograph. Beside the badge, scratched into the painted concrete, were the numbers 343. Mara stepped over them. We continued. The building felt different. The corridor seemed longer than it should have been. Doors appeared in the wrong order. Laboratory 4 stood where equipment storage had been. The wall clock outside the editing suite showed 23:19. My watch showed 22:17. Mara's phone showed September 12th, 1995. No signal, she said. I checked mine. The date had also changed. 12th of September, 1995. 23:21. A sound came from ahead. Tape reels turning. We reached Archive Storage 7. The door had disappeared. In its place stood a steel entrance, covered with rust and black moisture. A large white number had been painted across it. 7. Above the frame, a red lamp flashed. Mara stopped. This wasn't here. No. A plastic identification card hung from a hook beside the door. I recognized the badge from the VHS footage. Dr. Nathaniel Vale. The photograph had faded, but the face was clear. The man who had screamed at the beginning of the tape. Below the photograph, someone had written, "Temporary access, September 17th, 2026. Mara looked at me. That's 5 days from now. A knock sounded from the other side of the door. 3, then 4, then 3. We stepped back. A speaker above the access panel came to life. At first, there was only breathing. Then, my own voice said, "Mara, open the door." She looked at me. I had not spoken. The speaker continued, "She is still alive." "Who?" Mara asked. I grabbed her arm. "Don't answer!" A woman began screaming behind the door. Mara's face changed. "Anna?" "Who is Anna?" "My sister." I knew Mara had lost her older sister in a car accident when she was 16. The screaming continued. Then a woman shouted, "Mara, please, it's dark." Mara moved towards the panel. I pulled her back. "It knows what you expect," I said. "Vale told us." That's her voice. It is repeating something. She never said those words. No, but you expected she would. Mara fought against me. The voice behind the door began sobbing. Then it changed. My father called my name. He had died 9 years earlier. His voice was exact, not merely the sound. The hesitation before the second syllable, the faint whistle caused by a damaged tooth. "Elias," he said, "I'm sorry I left you alone." I released Mara. For 1 second, I believed him. That was all the chamber needed. The access panel lit up. Identity confirmed. The locking mechanism released. Mara pulled me backwards. The door opened 3 centimeters. Cold darkness filled the gap. A hand appeared, pale, long-fingered. It gripped the edge of the door from the inside. Another hand appeared above it, then another, then 5 more, all holding the same narrow opening. The voices stopped. The hands began pulling. We ran. Behind us, Metal screamed as the chamber door opened. We reached the emergency stairwell. The door would not move. I struck the crash bar repeatedly. Mara jammed the tripod into the frame and used it as a lever. The door opened enough for us to squeeze through. We entered the stairwell and pulled it shut behind us. Something struck the other side. Not hard, almost politely. 3 knocks. 4. 3. We climbed. 7 floors. Then 8. Then 9. The building had only 7 underground levels. The numbers painted on the walls repeated. Level 6. Level 5. Level 4. Level 7. Level 6. Level 5. Mara stopped. We're going in circles. We're going upwards. No. She pointed at the wall. A small dark stain shaped like a handprint. We had passed it 3 times. From below came the sound of someone climbing, 1 step at a time. Slowly, Mara looked over the railing. Reeve! A voice rose through the stairwell. Do not open the chamber. Vale's voice. Then mine answered from below. You already did. The same dialogue from the beginning of the tape. The footsteps accelerated. We left the stairwell at the next landing. The door opened into our laboratory. We had climbed for nearly 15 minutes and returned to where we started. The VHS cassette lay on the control desk. The evidence bag was beside it. Reeve's transport case stood open on the floor. Mara backed against the wall. No. The playback unit switched on by itself. The cassette tray opened. The intercom whispered, Continue observation. I should have destroyed the tape. I could have smashed it, burned it, pulled the magnetic ribbon from the casing. Instead, I inserted it into the machine. I told myself I needed answers. That was not true. The chamber had already learned the simplest thing about me. I would always choose knowledge over safety. The recording resumed. The date was September 17th, 2026. The image showed our laboratory. Mara and I stood beside the playback unit, wearing the same clothes. The camera angle came from the upper corner of the room. There was no camera there. On the recording, I watched myself turn towards Mara. We have to go back, the other me said. Back where? To Blackridge. Why? Because Chamber 7 was never beneath this building. He faced the unseen camera. It followed the tape. The image changed. Blackridge Storage Facility, the underground archive where the cassette had been discovered. The date remained September 17th. The footage showed Mara and me walking through a flooded corridor with torches. We reached the false wall in archive room B19, but the opening behind it was no longer small. A full passage led into the rock. At its end, stood the chamber. A voice on the recording whispered, "Original observation site." The video jumped again. I saw Dr. Nathaniel Vale sitting inside Chamber 7, alive. His hands were tied to a metal chair. His face had not aged. He looked towards the camera. "You think this is a recording?" he said. "It isn't." On our side of the screen, Mara stepped closer. Vale's eyes followed her movement. "It creates a path through expectation," he continued. "Every observer gives it another possible outcome. Every viewing makes one outcome more likely." I approached the monitor. "What are you?" Vale answered immediately. "I am what remains of Vale." Mara gasped. He looked at her. "And you are what remains of Mara." The laboratory lights went out. The monitor continued glowing. Vale leaned towards the camera. "You have been inside the chamber since the first frame." The screen went black. A second later, the lights returned. Mara was gone. Her tripod lay on the floor. I called her name. No answer. The laboratory door stood open. Beyond it was the corridor from the tape. The red lamp flashed above Chamber 7. The clock read 23:46. 1 minute before the timestamp from the recording. I entered the corridor. I do not know why. Perhaps I believed Mara was inside. Perhaps the tape had shown me this moment so many times that choice had become an illusion. The chamber door stood at the far end. A man lay in front of it. Nathaniel Vale. He wore his white coat and military uniform. Blood covered his face. He lifted his head as I approached. His eyes widened. "You," he whispered. I recognized the scene, the beginning of the cassette. The blurred face, the blood on the camera, the warning. A camera stood behind me on a metal tripod. Its red recording light was on. Vale crawled towards it. The clock changed. 23:47:19. He struck the lens. Blood ran across the glass. Something knocked from inside Chamber 7. 3, 4, 3. Vale looked into the camera. "Do not open the chamber." I tried to remain silent. I swear I did, but my mouth moved. My voice spoke. "You already did." Static filled the monitor attached to the camera. The chamber door opened. Darkness waited behind it. Mara stood inside. Her face was pale. She held out her hand. "Elias," she said, "please." Vale grabbed my coat. "That is not her." I knew he was right. I also knew that part of him wanted me to enter. Perhaps he believed the chamber would release him if it accepted someone else. Perhaps that was what every observer eventually became. Not a prisoner, a replacement. The thing wearing Mara's shape smiled. Behind her, dozens of figures stood in the darkness. Reeve, Hargreaves, the woman with the clipboard, men and women in uniforms from different decades. Some I recognized from missing person records. Some wore clothing from years that had not yet arrived. At the back stood another version of me. Older, gray-haired. His eyes had been removed. He lifted one finger to his lips. The chamber began producing voices, hundreds of them. Every word spoken in the laboratory. Every sentence from the tape. Every memory I had carried into the building. My mother calling me home. My father apologizing. Mara laughing during our first week at work. Reeve giving orders. Vale screaming. Then a new voice emerged from the noise. Yours, the voice of the person listening to this story. It said a sentence I cannot repeat. Not because I have forgotten it, because you have not said it yet. Vale released my coat. The chamber pulled him into the darkness. The steel door began closing. I seized the camera. I ran. The corridor stretched ahead of me, longer with every step. Behind me, the chamber door slammed shut. The date on the camera changed. 12th September, 1995. Then September 17th, 2026. Then tomorrow's date. Then today. I reached the laboratory and placed the camera on the desk. The VHS cassette lay beside it. The label was blank. A red pen rested nearby. I understood what I had to write, not to warn the next person. Warnings create curiosity, not to prevent the tape from being watched. That had already happened. I wrote the words because I had seen them before. The last tape from Chamber 7. Below them, do not view. The moment I finished, the laboratory disappeared. I was standing inside the welded locker at Blackridge. There was no room to move. The cassette was in my hands. Beyond the steel walls, I heard distant drilling, workers breaking through concrete. September 2026, the day the tape was discovered. I shouted. No one heard me. I struck the locker 3 times, then 4, then 3. The drilling stopped. Someone outside said, "Did you hear that?" Another worker answered, "Probably a pipe." The locker moved. I felt it being carried away. The cassette vanished from my hands. Darkness remained. I do not know how long I stayed there. Minutes, years. Perhaps there is no difference inside Chamber 7. Eventually, a screen appeared in front of me. I saw the tape being inserted into a machine. I saw myself sitting in the laboratory, Mara beside me, Reeve behind us. The recording began. 12 seconds of darkness. Vale screamed. The cycle had restarted. But something was different. In the upper right corner, the date was no longer September 17th, 2026. It showed the date on which you began listening. The image changed again. I saw a room I had never visited. Your room, your screen, your face reflected faintly in the darkness between frames. Behind you stood a steel door. There was no door there when the recording began. There is now. You may not see it if you turn around. The chamber does not always appear in the same place. Sometimes it enters through a reflection, sometimes through an empty screen, sometimes through a voice speaking words before you have thought of them. But it always begins with observation, a viewer, a recording, an expectation. You expected a story, so it gave you one. You expected an ending. That is the one thing it cannot provide. The tape is still running. Listen carefully. Beneath my voice, there is another sound. A slow, metallic knock 3 times. Then 4. Then 3. Do not answer it. Do not repeat the pattern, and whatever happens next, do not turn around, because the final frame of the tape no longer shows Chamber 7. It shows you, and the door behind you is beginning to open.